camera speed. Now, here is a motion picture film.
Good evening and welcome to Real Movies. Tonight's film could well be the first cult movie a lot of us in Generation Z ever saw. It was a bold new direction from the House of Mouse and didn't do that well at the box office. Probably because it was trying something different. Tonight's film is Atlantis, The Lost Empire. Starring Michael J. Fox as Milo Thatch, Atlantis follows Milo from his boiler room office at the Smithsonian Institute right down to the very centre of the Earth in search of the lost city of Atlantis. The expedition is funded by the eccentric millionaire Mr. Whitmore, who crews the project with a Dirty Dozen-style team who go in search of the lost city. There they find more than a few broken pieces of pottery. They find a whole lost empire, and it's up to Milo to save it. The film was a true collaborative endeavour, a real passion project for a number of producers and animators who had recently finished working on The Hunchback of Notre Dame and were longing to animate something other than long flowing gowns and musical numbers. The result is a pastiche of the great Saturday matinee traditions of Indiana Jones and the scale and scope of the works of Jules Verne, particularly 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. The approach of the team can be summarised best by t-shirts they had made and wore whilst they were animating the film, which simply read Atlantis. Fewer songs, more explosions. Not only would the plot be a radical departure for Disney, with giant submarines instead of decadent ballrooms and gun battles with ancient technology replacing song and dance numbers, so too would the art style be a radical departure for the House of Mouse. Gone were the willowy figures of the Disney Renaissance. Here was an art style inspired by Mike Mignola, creator of Hellboy. It has been said many, many times that the dynamic, angular styling of the characters in Atlantis: The Lost Empire essentially bring to life a comic book, and I heartily agree. The cast of Atlantis is massive, and it is a real ensemble piece. Michael J. Fox stars as Milo Thatch, and in my opinion, he really does steal the show. He is incredible in this movie, with utter commitment behind the microphone and a total energy throughout that just goes to show what a fantastic actor he is. I grew up absolutely idolising Michael J. Fox. I loved the Back to the Future films, and Marty McFly in a submarine. No wonder I was watching this film constantly as a kid, and it really did send home the message that nerds can be heroes too. Meanwhile, Cree Summer leads the way as the first proper kick-ass Disney princess, as Kida in Atlantis, paving the way for the likes of Elsa and Moana, and it's a real shame that she gets overlooked when people do talk about modern Disney princesses. Meanwhile, Leonard Nimoy, yes, Mr. Spock himself, plays the aged king of Atlantis with real earthy gravitas that sells the stakes of the film perfectly. I do not think Atlantis would be half as good without Leonard Nimoy, even though his character is only on screen for a few minutes. His death scene in the film is one of the highlights of the movie, and he's not the only vintage actor to voice a character in Atlantis. James Garner voices Commander Rourke, the villain of the film, with brilliant American thuggery and a real menacing sense of self-assured cockiness. It is essentially just a mirror image of some of the war film roles he's played previously, and it's great to see James Garner having fun as a villain in this film.
Some bad news.
What news?
Good news is I found your house.
Sadly, this was also the last film of the great Jim Varney, who voiced Slinky Dog in the first two Toy Story films. It was his last film role, and Atlantis was dedicated to his memory.
The men need the 4 basic food groups.
I got you 4 basic food groups. Beans, bacon, whiskey, and lard.
For the first Disney film in a long time without big song and dance numbers, the team turned to James Newton Howard to compose the score for the film, and he does an absolutely superb job. The music acts as an emotional handhold for the audience, starting off with your traditional sounds that wouldn't sound out of place in an Indiana Jones film, which was a clear influence on Atlantis. And yet, as the team head further and further on their journey and eventually arrive at Atlantis, the music takes on a sense of otherness, with Indonesian orchestral music a major influence, bringing in chimes, bells and gongs, so that when you actually arrive at the city of Atlantis, it does feel very, very other. You can tell that everyone involved in this film absolutely loved it and were really committed to bringing to life this vision. Unfortunately, it wasn't enough. The film was subject to some of the very first online marketing, and it was up against the first Shrek film and Lara Croft Tomb Raider at the box office. It was inevitably a financial disappointment, and the then president of Walt Disney Feature Animation wrote it off as a miss, which is a bit of a stab in the back considering how hard a number of people really worked on this. Critics weren't kind either. They said the film lacked an audience. It was too adult for kids, but too juvenile for anyone else. I'll be honest, I think that is completely missing the point. Atlantis: The Lost Empire, like every other Disney film, aims for a family audience, but a family who wants something different, something other than song and dance numbers and talking animals. And that's exactly what you get, and it's a really well executed different, something completely alternative to the usual Disney animation. It's on home video that Atlantis: The Lost Empire really found its audience and was elevated to cult status. Initially it was by fans of Mike Mignola and his artwork style, but eventually those who had just been a bit too young to see it at the cinema found it in the bargain basement aisle of their local supermarket, like I did, and absolutely loved its high adventure, comic book stylings, and Disney production values. After all, we're the generation that have made Marvel the true phenomenon that it is, so it's little wonder that films like this appeal to us. So here it is, available now on Disney+. Keep it cult with less singing and more explosions. It's a real adventure. This is Atlantis: The Lost Empire.